Hello everyone, it's Ranger Russ on the road again. I am doing a special Memorial Day weekend visit to one of Connecticut's state parks. I am at Fort Griswold Battlefield State Park, and this is going to be a really fun program for me. I want to remind everyone that the Connecticut state parks are open for the weekend. There is no swimming on any of the inland parks. You can swim on our shoreline parks, but also remember that the capacities of the parks are a little bit smaller right now so that we can keep our social distance. I know that as I was leaving Hammonasset, they were closing the gates because there were a lot of people at the park. It's a gorgeous day today. Now, this is a really special program, and I'm not going to start when the battle was. September 6, 1781 was the battle here at Fort Griswold. I'm actually going to start in 1976 because this was my first experience as a boy. I was brought to this fort, and for 1976 they did a massive reenactment. Hundreds of men dressed like British soldiers, 100 guys dressed like American soldiers. They had cannons that they were firing. Muskets were being fired. They had explosives buried on the hillside and going off. So for me, it was like I was at this battle. People marching around, smoke. It was really amazing. Lots of fun. Very impressive. So for me, the battles happened right then, 1976. There was a battle going on right here. The actual battle happened much earlier than that. And we're going to start our story on the New London side. So I'm on the Groton side of the Thames River. The battle really started on the New London side. I'm going to flip the camera around and show you where this battle began. So if you look over there, you can see the Eagle, the tall masted ship. That's the Coast Guard cutter Eagle. And right behind it is Fort Trumbull State Park, another one of Connecticut's beautiful state parks. It didn't look like that in 1781. It was an earthen rampart. Right now, it is the way it looked in the 1800s. It was rebuilt in the 1800s as a stone fort. These lower gun mounts that you can see right here, this lower rampart, that was also built in the 1800s. You can see that stone building, that's the powder magazine. The brick one is the furnace. They would heat up the cannonballs to fire into the wooden ships to hopefully ignite them on fire. So imagine that was just a field at the time. I hope my mic is blocking the wind a little bit here. So this was just a bare open field. Now the British began the invasion by dropping 800 men on the New London side, south of Fort Trumbull. And they dropped 800 men here on the Groton side, about 1.5 miles from the fort. These men were all under the command of General Benedict Arnold. If everybody knows that name, if you say you're a betrayer, that's the name you think of, Benedict Arnold. He betrayed the Americans, went over to the British side. He was from Norwich. So he was familiar with the area, and some say that his motivation was revenge for how his family were treated as he was going over to the British side. So he was not very happy with the area, but he knew the area. So he was put in command of this invasion. Now, at the time, during the Revolutionary War, New London was the privateer capital of the colonies. And privateers were basically pirates. They were revolutionary pirates. They were attacking British ships. And they were catching these ships out at sea. If they were able to capture the ship, they would bring it in to the harbor, and people would celebrate. It was like, oh, great, we got more British goods. You know, people would come down and view the ships, and, you know, this is a trophy of war. So as a new ship was being brought in, they would fire 3 cannon shots were fired to let everybody know, oh, we captured a new ship. Come down and celebrate with the soldiers or help us unload or whatever they would do. All right. If the fort were under attack, they would fire 2 cannon shots. And that would tell the people in the town, the local militia, that they need to come down and help defend the fort. Well, Benedict Arnold knew this. And as the British were coming in and the fort fired their 2 cannon shots, Benedict Arnold from his ship fired a 3rd shot. Okay? Now, some of what I'm going to tell you, some of the stories, may be more legend than reality. It's very hard to tell sometimes what is legend and what's reality. I'm going to tell you the version that I learned in 1976. That was the history that was being acted out at the time. They actually had British soldiers on the New London side of the river as well. So, excuse me. So the cannon fires, I could not find any historical records to back that up, but that's what was taught to me, that he knew the code, and the people in New London thought, oh, it was just another captured ship, and the militia were not mobilized. All right, so the British take that fort. They drop 800 men. There's only a few hundred, less than 200, defending the fort on the New London side. So the fort falls. Over here, 1.5 miles in this direction, the British forces are dropped. They're marching towards the fort, and they're under the command of Colonel Airy. He has 800 men and artillery, but the forest is too thick. The woodlands between where they're left and the fort, too thick. So his troops separate out and the artillery is left behind. So he's marching the 1.5 miles over here. When he gets here, he comes up and he sends up a flag of truce to the fort, demanding that the fort surrender. Now, in command of the garrison, it's just a militia garrison here at Fort Griswold. I'm going to show you the fort over here. There's some natural stonework that was worked into the wall here. So the commander of the militia here at Fort Griswold was Colonel William Ledyard. He had 165 men defending this fort. The British had 800, vastly outnumbered. After he is requested surrender by Colonel Airy, Colonel Ledyard says, no, we're not going to surrender the fort. Colonel Airy's upset. He just wants this over with. He wants to take the fort and move on. He says, if you don't surrender the fort, then we will not give any quarter, meaning there will be no mercy given. We'll take you, we'll kill you all, we're going to destroy you if you don't surrender now. Colonel Ledyard thinks that he's got reinforcements coming. He says no. He says, we shall not surrender the fort. Let the consequences be what they may. All right, so this makes the British commander really angry. He doesn't like this. Now he's got to attack the fort. So 10 o'clock, he fans his men out around the fort and they begin attacking. Remember, they don't have artillery. The Americans have a few small artillery. They start firing on the British as they come up. 800 British, 165 Americans. So there was a lower earthwork. This is the passway that you can get to the lower part of the fort, which isn't really there any longer. That's where the modified fort over there, and it probably was over in where these houses are as well. So this is how the Americans would retreat. Once that position fell, they could retreat back up here. And we're going to walk through the entrance that they would have taken into the fort, which is not how the British got in. So the British are attacking the fort. They're not happy that the Americans won't surrender. Hopefully I don't lose you as I go through this tunnel, but if I do, we'll have a little pause on the other side so you get caught up. This is how you get into the fort. So the Americans, as they're retreating back to the inner positions, this is the way they would have gone. You can see It's very narrow and it twists around. So any soldier coming through there, they're not going to have a clear line of sight. They're going to have a hard time getting through that tunnel, one man at a time. Just a couple of Americans could defend this, and they probably had a doorway on there as well. So now we're inside of the fort. The British are attacking. Now, this is where the legend gets even a little more foggy, okay? There's the Fort Griswold monument. You can actually, when the park is open, you could go up in that, but not open right now. So, as the British are attacking, one of the stories, one of the legends is that the flag was hit by a cannonball or a musket ball. That's what the Americans say. The flag drops, okay? At the time, that was a sign of surrender. So the British think, okay, they're surrendering. We can no longer need to attack. They put their guns on their shoulder and they start to march up to the gate. The front gate is over there. They're marching up to the fort, and they get mowed down. And at some point, Colonel Airy gets hit. So he's out of the battle. I believe that he died. I don't know if he died at that time. Here's a monument where Montgomery, Major Montgomery, he was a British soldier, was killed by, I'm not going to remember his name. It's up there, I'm sure. He was killed by the body servant of Colonel Ledyard, a freed slave, with a long pike as he tried to make the ramparts. Okay, so the British are attacking. The flag drops, the British go up, a bunch of them get killed, and the Americans put the flag back up. Now the British think this is a trick. During the French and Indian Wars, when the British were fighting the French and Indian allies in upstate New York, that's what they used to do. They would lower their flag, and then the British would think they were surrendering. They'd walk up and you could kill a bunch of them, and then they'd put the flag back up. So the British aren't very happy about this. Now this is all legend. There's no confirmation that the flag actually dropped, but that's part of the story here at the fort. So you can see back over there, there's Fort Trumbull on that side. And remember, this is an earthen fort. These are earthworks. There's not a lot of stone. There's a stone wall on the outside, so a few little stone walls on the inside, but basically this is an earthen fort. So the British continue the attack. There's no way that the Americans can hold the fort with only 165 men against 800. And eventually the fort falls. The British get into the fort. Now, the commanders have been wounded or killed. They're out of the battle. One of the lesser British officers, one of the junior officers of the British Army, he approaches Colonel Ledyard. And Colonel Ledyard, in a sign of surrender, at the time you surrendered by handing your sword over, Colonel Ledyard hands his sword to the British officer, who, in a rage, stabs him through the heart and kills him. This is the point where Colonel Ledyard supposedly dies, at the hands of a British officer. Now again, this is where you get conflicting stories. The British say that that never happened. And actually some historians believe that the militia that were defending the fort killed Colonel Ledyard so they could surrender to the British, because Colonel Ledyard was not going to surrender. Remember, he said, "Let the consequences be what they may. We will not surrender the fort." So, who killed Colonel Ledyard? We don't know, but it's pretty sure that he was killed with his own sword. All right, not a very nice way to go. So there would have been a gate, and actually, as a child, when I came here for the reenactment, they built a temporary wooden gate, which looked really cool. So it got busted down. And over in this field, there were hundreds of guys walking across this field, firing their muskets as they went. All right, so the fort falls. Colonel Ledyard is killed with his own sword. Give you a look at the monument there. There's a museum over there as well with a really nice model of the fort. So, the British have taken the fort. They are now in possession of the fort. Let me show you the sign here. One of the signs. And then we've got another sign right here. All right, so the British have possession of the fort. They load up some of the American wounded. There's lots of American wounded. So I told you there were 165 Americans, 88 were killed, many more wounded. Some of the wounded were loaded into a big heavy artillery wagon, like an ammunition wagon. And they were being brought back to the British ships to be taken as prisoners of war. Some of the lesser wounded were just marched down to the ships, but this wagon broke loose and rolled down this hill as they were attempting to bring the prisoners to the ship. The wagon breaks loose, it rolls down the hill, and at the bottom of this hill, I'm going to move out so that you can see it, is Ensign Ebenezer Avery. All right? His house is down there. And the wounded, the wagon crashes. The British say, forget it, they're all wounded, don't worry about them. We're taking the less wounded or the unwounded men back to the ships, and those wounded are brought to the house. Okay? So the wounded from the wagon are brought into the Avery house and cared for. And actually, they say, if you look on the floor, you can see the blood stains from where the wounded men were treated in that house. All right, so the British have taken Fort Trumbull on the New London side. They've now taken Fort Griswold on this side. Benedict Arnold wants to continue up. He wants to go. He wants to take Norwich. The entire battle here on the Groton side only took 40 minutes or so. So it started at 10. By 10, 11 o'clock, it's done. They're loading the prisoners up and moving on. Benedict Arnold wants to attack Norwich. But the British, they don't like that idea. They think it's too risky. It's a long way up the Thames River to Norwich. And they think that that's going to give the Americans too much of an opportunity. There's also gun batteries up the river. And the British don't want to have to deal with the guns that are on the banks of the Thames River. There's also, in one story, that the Americans had stretched a chain across the Thames River, which would have prevented ships from going up it. I'm really skeptical on that one. I guess it's possible, but I don't know how likely that is. So the British retreat. They pull out of New London and Groton, leaving both forts in ruin. They did what they wanted to do. They attacked New London. Half of New London was burned. They did burn the city of New London up to a certain point. And I can't see it from here, but there's a house. If you go in the downtown streets of New London, there's a plaque on the house that was the last house. All the houses to the south were destroyed, and from this house, that house north was not destroyed. All right. Do we have any questions? I just did a lot of talking there, didn't I? Somebody's saying Benedict Arnold fought on Lake Champlain. Yes, he did. He also led the invasion of Canada. In the early part of the war, the Americans thought that they could get the Canadian colony to join with them. And he was one of the men that went up into Canada and was not successful there. All right, I'm not seeing any other questions. Somebody is here watching from the fort. That's really cool. I want to show everybody right here this fort. Now, I mentioned before, it's mainly an earthworks fort. You can see some stone wall there. You see lots of poison ivy. We really ask people not to walk or climb on the earthworks. Again, it's an earthen fort. If you walk on it, climb on it, you're going to destroy it. You can erode it away, and we will lose this piece of history, this amazing piece of history. There's so much that happened here. 88 Revolutionary War militia, Americans, died here defending this fort. So we want to respect that and stay off. See, like this earthen mound right here? We want to leave that be. We don't want to be climbing on it and causing it to erode away. All right. This is such an amazing day to be at this park. I got really lucky. It's absolutely gorgeous. They were saying it's partly cloudy with some showers coming in this afternoon, but this is just amazing. And if nobody knows about the Eagle, I think it's the oldest serving ship in any Navy in the world. The Coast Guard uses it for training. It's really cool. It's over there on the New London Pier right now. Sometimes it's docked up at the Coast Guard Academy, and sometimes it's down here. So I did get to go on that one time, again as a kid. Got to tour that boat. It's probably why I like history so much. It's just such an interesting story that goes along here. All right, Rachel's saying the Shaw House. I think that's the one that it burned up till. All right, any questions? Not seeing any questions. They did lower, the flag was at full staff before. A staff person just came up and lowered it for Memorial Day. So I'm gonna have to go back to the Nature Center and put my flag at half staff for Memorial Day as well. Okay, I hope everybody enjoyed this. This is a very different park. It's much more of a historic park than wildlife, although you can see there's poison ivy and ferns and still wildlife here. But this is a little bit of a different venture for me. Somebody's asking what the circles are. So those circles that you see on the lower rampart, again, that rampart was put in the 1800s, so the cannon would have been different, but those are the cannon mounts. And the wheel, the half circle in the back, they were wheels on the back of the cannon, so it could turn right to left. I hope that explains that enough for you. So the center, it's not actually a square, but sort of a square there. That's where the cannon would be mounted, and then the wheels in the back. And I believe that they were mainly naval guns that were converted and put into this fort. But we'll have to check that one. All right. Any other questions? So again, we do these programs Tuesdays through Fridays at 11 and 2 each day. You can also see the past programs that we've run on Meggs Point Nature Center's YouTube page. Please subscribe there and follow us and like us on Facebook. And if you want to see additional information about these tours, you can go to meggspointnaturecenter.org, the virtual learning center. We will have vocabulary words, bits of history, fun facts, things like that will be in there, little games that you can play at home. I hope that everyone enjoyed this tour of Fort Griswold Battlefield State Park, and I'm going to leave you looking at the cannon in the front of the park. This is not one of the cannons that would have been there in 1781. Again, this fort was rebuilt in the 1800s, 1840s. This is one of those cannon. But That's a pretty cool cannon. And there's another one on this side. So I really encourage people to visit this park. It's got a lot of history. I don't know if you can see in there. Nothing really there. A lot of history. All of the Connecticut state parks have a bit of history to them. This is one of those that have a really significant portion of history. So again, I hope everyone enjoyed, and I will see you next Tuesday at 11 o'clock with an episode of My Favorite Animal.